And now on Tucson Business Radio X, your home for real estate with Carol Nugget.
Well, welcome. This is Your Home for Real Estate radio version. I'm Carol Nugget, and I am delighted today because we're going to have a fantastic show. We're going to address what is going on in downtown Tucson. I'm sure many of you have noticed that things are really changing, but might not know what exactly is going on. And I have such terrific guests today. I was teasing them earlier. They are so dedicated and so committed to this community that if I read their full biographies, we'd never have time to get to the content of the show. So my first guest is Tom Heath. Tom is the senior loan officer at the Heath team at Nova Home Loans. And Tom has spent really a lifetime dedicated to helping people purchase and finance property here in the Tucson area. And in addition to helping people with their financing, he's also very committed to financial literacy in the community and providing resource information about Tucson's urban development. He's also an advocate for our local businesses, and these are all very important aspects of what we're going to be talking about later on. Tom, as part of his tremendous dedication, serves on the executive board for the Downtown Tucson Partnership, the board of directors for the Tucson Association of Realtors. He's also on the steering committee for the Tucson Festival of Books and Local First Arizona. And he's had a lot of roles with the Arizona Mortgage Lenders Association, the Arizona Association of Mortgage Professionals. He's served on the Mayor's Council of Affordable Housing Commission, and he's still involved with the effort to bring homeownership opportunities to downtown Tucson. So welcome, Tom. We're really happy to have you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. Excited to be here.
And my next guest is an old friend of mine, I like to think, Jannie Cox. Jannie is a member of the board of RioNuevo, which is the engine that's been really underpinning a lot of what is going on downtown. I love this. Jannie describes herself as someone who provides a rich tapestry of community service and leadership over the 49 years she's been a Tucson resident. So thank you for your service. And you're also a member of the board of BBVA Bank. You're on the Southern Arizona Leadership Council. And Jannie was a longtime CEO of the Carondelet Foundation of Carondelet Health Networks when she was still a working lady. And she's also served on so many nonprofit boards. I really couldn't tell you all of them, but they do include United Way, Junior Achievement, the Gregory School, Arizona Theater Company, American Cancer Society, the American Red Cross, and so on and so on. If there is a cause in Tucson, Jannie has been a part of it. So really, thank you so much for being here. And I don't want to forget this. I first met Jannie because for 3.5 years I was a sponsor of Meet Me at Maynard's, and Jannie is the founder of Meet Me at Maynard's, which is almost 11 years. meetmeatmaynards.com. I'm not going to take the time to describe it. It's a wonderful community event that supports our thriving downtown businesses, and we have Jannie to thank for it. And my third guest is Zach Yenser, who I can only describe as a mover and shaker. Officially, Zach is the executive director of the Tucson Young Professionals, and Zach is absolutely dedicated to serving the communities as they intersect between neighborhoods, businesses, and development of those communities. And he also serves on a number of boards, the Downtown Neighborhood and Residence Council, the Downtown Tucson Partnership Board, where he represents his community of Menlo Park. He's also the Neighborhood Association president. He co-chairs the Urban Housing Accessibility Task Force. He is on the Tucson Metro Chamber's Talent Task Force. He is the host of his own radio show, Tipping Point, every morning at 9 o'clock. And Tipping Point really provides in-depth discussion and information about the people, the ideas, and the issues shaping Tucson's future. And you can listen to Zach on AM 1030, The Voice. Zach was also named the 2019 40 Under 40 Man of the Year by the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce in the Arizona Daily Star. So thank you.
Thank you for having me here.
Well,
sorry, I had to switch off and remember that you're the host today. I was about to say thank you for being here. I'm thankful to be here, Carol. Thank you so much.
Well, I obviously have three tremendous people who are really going to help me and all of you listeners understand what's going on in Tucson. You know, I've been here a little over 5 years. I was saying to my guests, I moved here about 6 months after the downtown trolley started. I got involved at Maynard's because I wanted to support the growth and development and transformation of our beautiful, wonderful, exciting downtown. But with all development and growth, there are challenges as well as things to be excited about. If any of you heard my program in November, I did a program on some of the joys and the trials and the tribulations and the joys of what's going on with 4th Avenue development. But today we're going to focus on downtown Tucson. And I actually thought a really good way to start would be to ask Jannie just to talk a little bit about the history of downtown. Why did RioNuevo get involved? So where would you like to start?
Well, RioNuevo was created by the Arizona Legislature, and they defined an area of Tucson that they felt needed revitalization. And that includes most of downtown, not all of downtown. Believe it or not, El Charro is carved out. We've not all figured out how that happened, but it's carved out. There's a block carved out of the boundaries. And then it goes all the way down Broadway to Wilmot. And RioNuevo, our charter is our primary goal and responsibility is to renovate and advance the Tucson Convention Center and what surrounds the Convention Center. That's how it all started. But we can operate anywhere within the boundaries of RioNuevo. It was established in 1999, and we are funded with a portion of the sales tax that is collected within our boundaries. So that's how we get the funds that we use to reinvest in our community.
So business owners are really reinvesting in their own community.
They are. Mm-hmm. They are.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I think that's terrific. And do you want to just quickly give us a little bit of an update on what are some of the projects that RioNuevo has?
Oh, I would love to.
Great. Thank you.
There are so many of them.
I know there are.
that we have been working on for probably, I've been involved for 10 years now, but in the last 8, there's just been tremendous advances in the redevelopment of downtown. In fact, in the last 8 years, there's been a total investment of $1.4 billion in downtown Tucson. This includes RioNuevo's investment, the city, the county, and also private investment. So RioNuevo, for about every dollar RioNuevo puts into downtown, 8 more are put in by others, whether it's private or public. We were very instrumental in bringing Caterpillar to Tucson. We're very proud of that. There are more than 750 employees at Caterpillar now on Cushing Street over by the Mercado. And a quick little story about Tucson that I'm very proud of is that when Caterpillar invited their employees from the Midwest to come and work here, only a small percentage of them accepted the offer. I mean, these people like ice fishing and they have snowmobiles. They don't want to live in this dangerous desert with rattlesnakes and Gila monsters. But the 10 to 20% who came here wrote home and said, you got to come. You just got to be here. And now 90% of those who were invited are here.
That's terrific. As someone who moved here 5.5 years ago and is now doing a radio program and doing everything I can to promote and protect Tucson, I can completely understand that.
Yes, and then we've participated in the work that Gadsden does on the west side, the Mercado and the Monier Apartments and the Mercado Annex. We're especially proud of the AC Marriott on the corner of Broadway and 5th. The AC brand was purchased by Marriott several years ago in Europe. It's a very popular boutique hotel in Europe. And the hotel in Tucson, Arizona is the most successful AC Marriott in the world. And there were naysayers in the beginning saying this hotel will make it 5 years and it'll be sold for pennies on the dollar. Well, they were wrong. And we have Cathedral Square was just recently completed. We participated in that, actually Ochoa Street from Church to Stone. Got it. Thank you. We participated in that street. I don't know if you've seen it, but it is really beautiful.
I actually have a friend who lives in there, and I've toured
beautiful.
it, and I've seen her unit.
Oh, yes.
Which is quite remarkable.
Yes, and there are only 8 units in there. She was lucky to get one of them. So those are just a few examples, but we have right now 2 hotels under construction now, one in the parking lot of the TCC and one across the street adjacent to Cathedral Square. 2 wonderful hotels. One is a DoubleTree and the other Hilton and Hampton Inn. And then we have 2 parking garages going on at the TCC. So parking is not going to be a serious issue. TCC has struggled with parking for quite some time, and that is going to be fixed up really soon. So we're really pleased with the construction there. As Tom was saying earlier before the show, that it's so neat to see all the cranes in downtown Tucson. It's a beautiful sight to see that much happening and that much investment in this incredible community. And then coming up soon, we have probably another nearly $500 million of new projects coming on soon. And they are the Bautista. You might not have heard about the Bautista adjacent to the Mercado. That's another one of the Gadsden projects. Going to be fabulous, retail and residential. There's 75 East Broadway, another $100 million going there. The Ronstadt Center has now been approved by the City Council, so we're expecting that to happen soon.
Will you just, I just ask you to stop on that for 1 second, because that's so new, and a lot of people don't know yet that is going to be a 4-story.
It will still be a transportation center. I don't know what the height is going to be. I can't tell you that, but the ground floor, the first few floors will be retail. We will still have a transit center there, but it won't be the only focus. And then upstairs will be residential. So it's going to be a mixture of residential and retail in there. Hotel Arizona, we've all been hoping to see something happen there. I don't know the details of that, but I do know that behind the scenes there's work going on to get that hotel reopened. And I know we all want that to happen. I believe the city has already approved some incentives for them. The RioNuevo is investing $70 million in the Tucson Convention Center. That will mean a renovation of the music hall, Leo Rich Theater, the Ekbo fountains, the meeting rooms, the bathrooms. We'll also add several new meeting rooms to the TCC.
So it's not just the convention center itself, it's the whole campus.
It's the entire campus of the convention center, yes.
And when is that expected to start?
It has started.
Oh, it has?
It has started. And that'll be a $70 million project over the next couple of years.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh.
Then there's a new Moxie Marriott coming in right behind the Martin Luther King apartments.
Oh,
in
that is
empty lot
where the ice skating
rink was this summer.
Okay.
Exactly right. And then there's the Volvo site on Broadway, another $24 million. And then we have to add in Sunshine Mile, which is just now beginning. We've moved 5 of the 7 bungalows between Warren and next to Warren. Warren, I forget the other street.
Out east.
But yeah, well, no, close to downtown.
It's just west of Campbell.
Yes, just west of Campbell. And we're moving those.
Oh, west of Campbell.
No, east of Campbell. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, there were 7 bungalows, and we're moving those back to get them out of the roadway as Broadway is being widened.
Correct.
And in a few years, they are going to be bars and restaurants and retail shops. And a lot more on Sunshine Mile.
Terrific.
More than I can talk about here.
Terrific. Thank you.
Before we move on, can I share my favorite RioNuevo story? Because I think this gets lost in all the billions and millions in these large stories.
Okay, good.
one of the earlier projects involved Mission Garden.
Yes.
And helping that come about. And if you're not familiar, that's where they recreate 4,200 years worth of agricultural history at the site of Tucson's birthplace. And that doesn't happen, most likely, if RioNuevo doesn't help. That Mission Garden was a huge component of what drove the City of Gastronomy designation.
Oh,
That's
yes.
driving millions of dollars in food tourism.
Yeah.
So sometimes we look at this 8-to-1 ratio and we don't realize that's just an investment ratio. The return has been significantly higher when you look at something as impactful as that. And then with Sunshine Mile, the original plan was to tear down those bungalows.
Exactly.
And RioNuevo steps in and says, hey, we can turn this into something profitable. So it's not just the big projects, which are extremely important, but they're also focused on the cultural and the small components that really make us a community. And I think sometimes that gets lost in the conversation.
Yes.
I'm glad you brought that up because I think Zach has some concerns, and I think most of us do, is we want Tucson, and I know the historic Fourth Avenue Coalition, this is their same position, is we all want Tucson to develop into a better, more thriving community, but we want the history to remain.
Exactly.
To remain. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. And I want to just go to you, Tom, because as Jannie is discussing all of these remarkable and wonderful developments, one of the things I know that you're concerned about is that so much of the development downtown is rental. Mm-hmm. And obviously, I'm a residential realtor. And I share that concern, not only from the perspective of we want people to invest. We have businesses that are willing through RioNuevo. They're willing to invest in that community and maintaining it. And renters don't often have the same feeling of ownership. And I can say that when I work with clients, there are people who would love to buy a condo downtown, but we don't have any condominium development. Everything is rental. So I'm curious what your thoughts and perspective are on that.
Well, that's what we're seeing going up right now. The major projects, the Flynn, which used to be La Placita 200 plus, that's condos rendezvous, or it's apartments rendezvous is apartments. So we're seeing a lot of that. Where we're having some success on the home ownership side are the smaller lots where we're being able to put 4 units on 18th Street or 17 units behind Stone. And Miramonte just started a project in the barrio, which I don't know the details, but I would imagine was fairly challenging to get through the Historical Commission to make a new project work in that area. But that'll be 13 owner-occupied units. So we're seeing them come in, but we're not seeing the large scale. Lots of reasons for that. That would probably be its own show. We do have hopes that on the site of the Casa Vicente restaurant, that parking lot, there is potential development for an actual condo, 30, 35, 40 unit condo. That would be the first in Tucson. So that hopefully will be able to come to fruition. And then the success of that, I think, will drive what's happening. Because if you look at some of the Rendezvous, for example, they're coming in with 1,400 square feet apartment, and rents are going to be around $3,000 a month.
I know.
So that translates to a significant mortgage payment if you need to finance a condo. So there is demand for that. It's just hard to quantify a demand for rental and how it translates to that of a condo. So once we get one, I think it will sell quickly, and I think that will then help the developers make more choices to go in that direction.
And I know that just south of town, where there are a lot of the old tiny little bungalows, I mean, there's a lot of flipping going on. There's a lot of redevelopment. But as you said, because many of those properties are historic, it's a little bit of a nest egg trying to get some of that work approved. Yeah. But you know, I agree with you. I mean, I would love to see some condominiums. Everything that's being built right now, whether it's 4th Avenue, we have 2 big projects on 4th Avenue, or downtown. It is all rentals. And given what Tom just said about we're looking at, $3,000 a month in rent, if those were...
For that one particular project.
Right.
That one's specifically designed. And don't get me wrong, I'm happy that we have rentals. We need people, we need density, we need to have that.
Right.
We're just looking for a little bit of a balance, and I think that will come as we get some stability and a little bit more growth here in downtown.
Well,
hopefully is echoed by the neighbors within the El Presidio district, historic district. We're doing a project there to activate that neighborhood, and the neighbors said to us, "Bring us if there's going to be development, let it be residential development. We need people here, but not renters. We want neighbors. And they're desperate for neighbors because their houses, between every house, there's a lawyer's office. And they would really love to see the neighborhood become a real neighborhood again. So they want us to encourage residential, not rental, but buyers.
And the Tucson Association of Realtors just recently commissioned a study from a national group to look at how to best utilize the space that we have. How do we fall within the historic districts? How do we work within that to create ownership opportunities? Because there's zoning issues. There's, we have
historic issues are huge.
All kinds of things, but we can tackle this as a community and not just for downtown, because as streetcar expansion happens, we're going to want density. So whatever we create here is something we can duplicate in other parts of the community.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm hopeful that some of those renters are going to, as you just said, with the Caterpillar employees who've come out, some of the renters are going to fall so in love with downtown that as it becomes available for people to invest in owning property, residential property, that they'll go ahead and do that.
Yeah. And some will just love to continue to rent.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lifestyle choice that a lot of people are making these days. But we just want to make sure it's a choice and not the only option that they have.
Well, and so that brings me to you, Zach, because I know that one of your big concerns is what's going on with affordable housing. And I know you recently posted on one of your social media sites some of the statistics about the need for affordable housing versus what's really going to be available.
Sure. And I think the distinction that I'm trying to message is I think we have there's a conversation around affordable housing and a conversation around housing affordability. And to me, the housing affordability conversation is the umbrella conversation because what it really says is there adequate opportunity for anyone who wants to live where they want to live to access the housing that they want to access. And I think why the housing affordability conversation is interesting is that I'm going to throw out a number here, and I feel like I'm on thin ice because I'm with a couple of realtors who know way more than I do. But I think right now in Tucson that if you are making south of $70,000 to $80,000 in Tucson, becoming a homeowner is difficult. And I think with what the median wages are that are being made in Tucson makes the rental market even in downtown Tucson difficult. When we had a 2018 and a 2019 where the average sale of a home was $300,000 and the new home sale price in Tucson was $350,000, whereas in our county, our median family income is $65,000. Yes, our market is more affordable than other places, but we don't talk about how our wages match what is on the market. And part of that is that, on the MLS, we had about a month's supply of housing there for a while in 2019. Healthy markets have 3 to 6. So a lot of people will say, well, just create more supply. It solves the whole issue. Housing's more complicated than that. But certainly I think we have to figure out how do we match supply to demand. And so when we talk about the housing issue, I'm kind of the unicorn in the room because I'm talking about also, displacement on one end, right? Are we making sure that as our neighborhoods change, longtime residents get to stay there? But I'm also saying, how do we make space for neighbors for more neighbors? Right? Someone that looks like me, and I know there will be a picture attached to this at some point so people can put that face to the name, but someone that looks like me doesn't have the same access to downtown. And so when we talk about, are we going to generate a thriving downtown but send the workforce that works there 20 miles up the highway? Cities have tried that around the country. It doesn't work. It's not optimal. And so I take the neighbors for more neighbors approach. How do you, as downtown thrives, how do you make sure that the housing stock, that maybe there's a 4th or 5th generation person living there, how do they maintain that opportunity to stay there? And then for a newcomer, how do we make sure that there's accessibility and affordability for them to enter the market? And I think as downtown shifts, I think we're seeing challenges on both those ends. And I think my message is optimistic. My message is, how do we create a downtown for all? A healthy downtown needs healthy neighborhoods, and healthy neighborhoods need a healthy downtown. So I don't approach the issue from negativity. I approach the issue from, we have templates around the country of cities that have done this and are 15 or 20 years ahead.
Right.
And so we get to look ahead and go, what do we like about that growth and development? And what hasn't worked so well? And my show is called Tipping Point, and this is not a plug. It's my message. We're at a tipping point in Tucson where the decisions we make in the next 5 or 10 years will shape the next 50. So that's my voice is, Phoenix is having housing challenges, right? It's not New York City or San Francisco anymore. Phoenix is having massive challenges. And so are we. But we don't believe that about ourselves. We've always been the affordable city. We've always been the place where the cost of living is low. The tide is changing quickly under our feet. And if we're going to step into our best as a city, as neighborhoods, we need to be having this conversation of housing affordability. And Carol, you're absolutely right. And this is my last theme. When I talk about housing affordability, everyone wants to go to Section 8 and affordable housing. I'm not talking 70s, 80s, 90s urbanism. I'm talking about these mixed communities where everybody on whatever socioeconomic scale they are has an opportunity to live and to work and to play in the downtown area. And so that's my passion. And the numbers right now are pretty scary. The amount of numbers of housing, both single family and rental, that Tucson needs in the next few years. We're not even close to developing. We're not even close to putting and standing up the supply that we need, which means that when supply doesn't meet demand, prices go up. And so one of the weird pieces of this equation is that to keep costs low, to make sure that more people can stay and more people can enter, actually means an increase in supply. And so that's my message.
Well, it's interesting that you say that. I know we're talking really specifically about downtown, but Zach and I were both at the new construction forecast in November, and the lead speaker was the land broker who sells land to all of the developers. Now, most of the new construction, when we think in terms of new construction, that's being done not immediately in downtown in terms of residential communities. But even there, I believe, if I remember correctly, he said that there's going to be a need for about 14,000 lots in the next 4 years, and we only have 8, believe he said. So we're kind of bursting at the seams in all directions. And I don't see you as a naysayer. I see you as representing a very important constituency, because if we don't address the needs, we already have a lot of over 40 people. I deal with them all of the time, especially this time of year. And as you said, I can't even tell you how things have changed in the last couple of years. I have people now who still think they can come out and get 3 or 4 acres of land and a really nice 2,500 square foot house for a couple $100,000. Well, those don't exist anymore out here because the national perception of Tucson has really kind of lagged behind what's really going on here. And I think I have to take a moment here just to say that this is Your Home for Real Estate on Tucson Business Radio X, broadcasting and podcasting also live from the Stewart Title Building on Broadway. I'm Carol Nygett. I'm your host. I am a residential realtor, and I would love to hear from any of you at 520-448-6033, either to help you with real estate, of course, or if you have questions or topics for the show. And my guests here today are Tom Heath, who is a board member of the Tucson Downtown Partnership, Jannie Cox, who's a board member of RioNuevo, and Zach Yenser, who's the executive director of the Tucson Young Professionals. And so I just want to ask you, because I know you're going to have to leave a little early, because I know that you have looked, as you mentioned, you've looked at some other cities that are a little ahead of us on this curve, and you've alluded to what are the lessons we can learn. Are there any specific things that you've determined that you'd like to see us consider? In Tucson? Right.
I could go a couple of different angles. The first is, and I thought Jannie would enjoy this, is I had a caller call into my radio show and say, Zach, people come to Tucson for that 3 acres and a home. Mm-hmm. And I said, kindly, that's the way it used to be, right? I think our perception of why people move to Tucson, move to Arizona is so off from the reality. And I think we've known over the last 10 or 15 years that people are moving to Tucson with the expectation that there is walkability, there is some level of density, there is a thriving downtown. And certainly my generation, I think in the 20s and 30s, is looking for that. And I think to answer the other piece of your question, what worries me a little bit still in Tucson is that we're looking to tackle these challenges, right? Of do you just have a great downtown, or can you actually live there, right? We want to tackle that challenge through single family zoning and single family housing. And I think the deep challenge is that we can't outrun the problem without a multifamily housing strategy. And I hear this even within municipalities, right? People will say, well, you solve a lot of these even gentrification displacement problems through home ownership and single family zoning. Land trust models are single family zoning based. When I went to Austin, with the city of Tucson, we saw land trusts that were developing multifamily housing. And so what we saw in Austin was a community that just absolutely boomed. It grew overnight. An exodus of people went to Austin. But I saw it become very corporatized, very top heavy, to the extent where the housing didn't catch up, and homelessness was rampant. And so the housing didn't match the demand. And so you're actually starting to see an exodus out of some of these boom towns that seem to check all of the boxes, but don't have this foundation of livability. And so I think figuring out how to create more supply is important. I think figuring out missing middle housing, right? That's everything from ADUs, accessory dwelling units, to empowering local communities to be developers of their own community. It's not just single family, it's not multifamily, it's kind of somewhere, in between. Having a strategy around transportation and a level of density, I think is important. But really making sure that we're matching housing stock and supply with demand, and figuring out how, in my mind, this is the last thing I'll say, is when I came back from San Antonio and Austin, we spent a week in Texas, I came away with a realization about Tucson. In Austin, they floated $200 million worth of bonds just to solve affordable housing. Just to say, how does the public sector help to support creating more housing and more affordable housing units? The private sector in Austin is also very powerful. Booming economy, growing really well. You can have very powerful conversations with the public sector and the private sector. When I got on the plane, I thought, does Tucson's public sector have the ability to heavily invest in more housing and affordable housing? I was like, could we float any bond in this city for that? I don't think the present day would allow us to. And then I thought, does the private sector on its own have the strength to create more housing, or to step in and say, we're going to create 5,000 more units in the next 10 years? And the answer is no to that question at all. I came away thinking that if Tucson's going to tackle housing issues, it's going to be a public-private partnership. It's going to be the public sector knowing where to invest or how to step back, whether that's regulation, impact fees, whatever the case. It's going to be the private sector also realizing where it can invest as well. But it's going to be a public-private partnership in ways that other communities maybe don't have to think about it.
Well, that brings me to Tom, because I know the Downtown Tucson Partnership, I'm just curious. Number one, I don't know if you want to give our listeners an opportunity to understand what the Downtown Tucson Partnership is, first of all. But I was also listening to Zach. I was wondering if you think that infill or reuse projects might address some of the concerns that he raised.
Yeah, well, sure. For the first part, the Downtown Tucson Partnership has been in existence for some time. Their primary role is the safety and security of people in the downtown area. So it is a business improvement district, a BID, and members of that BID, they self-select to be a part of that, and they pay into this program, this fund, on a 5-year commitment basis, and that's what funds the staff. If you're downtown and you see the folks in the purple shirts doing the maintenance and security, that's part of the Downtown Tucson's partnership efforts. They've also really expanded into providing service programs and looking at marketing and development. Quite a broad spectrum of what they're covering. That they are privately funded through those in that business improvement district. To Zach's point, I think every time I watch Zach's Facebook feed, and if you're not following him, you should follow him because he always has great knowledge. He's pulling these nuggets, and sometimes they're a little scary, but they're always good nuggets. And I like how he's positioning this public and private thought. And I think in Tucson, we're going to see a solution that we haven't seen other places. That's my feeling. I don't think we're going to follow the path of some of these other cities. We've got a completely different climate. And it may sound silly, but we have 4,200 years worth of continuous history. We do things differently in Tucson. But there is a balance. We have this concern of how do we keep folks in their homes that have lived there for so long. And really, zoning changes could help them with that. Because you have people that have a single family on a lot zoned for a single family, but large enough for putting multiple family units on there. And I think you can help that family stay in their home, help them attain a little bit more financial stability. And I do think potentially a bond that is tied to that type of development, where it's not just corporate development or private development, where individuals have a fund where they can tap into to then build and create something for themselves. I mean, you could double downtown's housing stock pretty quickly with a lot of those lot sizes. So I think infill is going to be a key component. You cannot ignore that, but going up vertical has to be a part of this conversation. You just can't put that much housing in a residential without going vertical. And I know that's a concern on 4th Avenue. I know it's a concern in other places, that you have to have that density if you're going to drive the type of economy that we believe we're going to have.
Can I just in 30 seconds go on the other nugget that I got from my conversation with housing and community development and planning and development services with the city is that the average density in Tucson is 3 units per acre. For the city just to pay for itself, right? Not to have a nest egg, not to grow a surplus, for the city to pay for itself, roads, police, fire, that number needs to be more like 6 to 8 units an acre. And so Tucson is playing very old school in this sense of that density number. And I think when we talk about why are our roads in bad shape, why can't we float a bond for these issues? Why isn't our economy big enough to pay for more police and fire? Well, part of it is we literally can't pay for ourselves. Right? The reason we've passed the bonds we've passed in the last few years is because we have no other way to cover just our basic needs, including 70% of our roads that are in failing condition, which is awful in the city of Tucson. So as a neighborhood advocate and as a young professional, I'm in this really awkward bridge spot most of the time where I'm trying to figure out how do you have a healthy neighborhood that feels like the changes that are happening are for it and not alongside of it, and how do you not have turnover in who's been living there, but how do you also create this open invitation for people who want to live in that community? And what's interesting is at the end of the day, it's about math. And a lot of people don't think about the math of our community.
You aren't
overall.
under 40. You're data-based.
I failed calculus, but I like math.
It's interesting. In the room here, we have an expert on a model that has worked, and that's RioNuevo. And that RioNuevo works, in my opinion, because of the leverage. You don't own projects. You bridge gaps.
Right.
You help people make things happen.
We're a catalyst for that project.
We don't have that in the residential world.
No.
And if we could find that solution,
and RioNuevo can't play there because whatever we do
revenue
has to generate sales tax.
Right.
So if we can find that entity that can work off of increased property tax, not increasing the tax of current property, but putting more properties out there that can be taxed.
Well, what I'm wondering, given what you were just saying, is especially I know just south of Tucson and even in the Presidio area, there are a lot of people who are buying residential who are also making them workspaces. And I wonder if that might, but they are not.
And
Can they?
And that's one of the issues. The residents, there are so few residents anymore because there are more business offices.
But if someone purchased, I'm trying to be a bridge here. If an individual purchased a home, that also had a workspace in it, where it was a designated business, could they then participate in the sales tax contribution to RioNuevo?
Well, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I'm thinking that's a model that might, because I know a lot of the
retail.
So does it have to be retail?
It has to be retail.
It has to be retail.
And then it has to recoup the investment. So if you're getting, RioNuevo's done a great job of making sure that when they put something out, that what they're going to get back is greater than what they put in.
Yeah.
And so it's not a handout; it's just a bridge to help people. So I think it's the right idea. There has to be this intermediary that can bring the public and private together and bridge that gap. We've seen it successfully done on the commercial side. We just haven't quite figured out how to do it on the residential side.
Well, Jannie, how does RioNuevo make the decisions for what projects they're going to fund?
Well, there are a couple things. One, it has to first all have an economic study and prove that it is going to return more than at least 100% of what the value is of that property is today. And so they have to get an independent economic study done before we will even consider it. And then we can offer some incentives that really don't cost us anything. If we have a piece of property that's undeveloped and a developer comes and fills it with retail, we will give them return their excise tax for the first 8 years. Also, any sales tax the state portion of the sales tax that they collect the first 8 years, we can give it back to them. So that gives them a real boost to get a business started and be very successful. And that doesn't cost us anything to do because we aren't receiving any tax dollars on that property now. So it's easy for us to provide that incentive to get business going.
And I know on 4th Avenue, there was a community benefits agreement, and the union development has participated. The other new development there chose not to participate. So does RioNuevo have any expectations for whoever they choose to fund that they interact with the community?
We have not. That's not something that is in our work plan right now. We certainly encourage that. But right now we are looking at it strictly from the business angle. And RioNuevo also wants to be the last in, not the first. So if you came to us with a project, we would want to know if you have an economic study, then we'd want to know how you have that funded. And then once that funding is tight and we know that whatever retail you're going to have, you actually have people who are going to move in there.
Right.
You're going to sign leases. Then we will be the last money in or the last incentive in, but we don't start anything. You need to button it up pretty well before you come to RioNuevo.
Well, and I know in the case of the 4th Avenue building, the city council really made some of those decisions about the provision of tax incentives.
Right.
So, all right. Well, that's interesting to know. So, Zach, because you do represent an under 40 constituency and you also represent your community, I'm just curious, do you have any idea what the percentage of single-family ownership there is in Menlo Park?
So Menlo Park is 3,000 households. I would say that the Monnier, the West End development, and the Bautista development, which will go in soon, are going to shift that percentage quite a bit. I would say before the last 6 or 7 years, it's probably been 85 to I'd say 90% single family housing in Menlo Park. There's been some townhomes, some duplexes, but it's been mostly kind of your smaller bungalow, 12 to 1,600 square foot single family residence.
So do you feel like Menlo Park is a model? I know you're working very hard in that community. I'm just wondering if you feel that might be a model for other neighborhoods in the city.
I do. And it's funny you brought that up because that was the sense I got a few years ago, that Menlo Park could be a model for the community, but also for the nation, in terms of how do you balance the 4,200 years of continuous history with a renaissance of Tucson. And it's kind of been interesting that the people that I talk to in their 50s and 60s used to have livability, walkability, access to downtown. The I-10 changed that. And so in this weird way too, with the access to the streetcar and with some of these other modes of transportation, yes, it's a distinct shift in the community, one that we have to manage, but it's also almost a return to what some of my elders in the neighborhood used to have when they could walk to high school, they could walk to Tucson High. And so to me, Tucson reflects both rich history at every stage of its growth and development, along with a renaissance of the new. Tucson has always lived in that tension. It's not always been new. It's not always been old. It's been this constant tension back and forth. And I think, and my hope is that Menlo Park is a community that continues to bridge that. And as a piece of the downtown balances density with single family.
We also have the challenge of a landfill that that's extremely costly to go through that abatement process. So that's part of that conversation.
$1 million per acre.
Yeah, $1 million per acre.
Tucson's birthplace, and before any of us were here, we threw a lot of trash in it, and now we're paying for it.
So you think about decisions that we make and how it impacts future generations. That's one that has really changed the dynamic of the growth in that area.
Yep.
Well, and we were pretty surprised to find out it was a landfill after the city gave it to us. RioNuevo had no idea they were accepting a landfill, and the city didn't. They say they didn't know.
Our park used to be a landfill too. Really bizarre.
Very
interesting.
Our Menlo Park.
Oh, your
park.
Menlo Park. Oh, okay.
It also was the first red-lined community in the
really?
city. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So deep history and a lot of hard feelings to work through.
I think part of what Zach's talking about is balance. That a thriving community is a community that has a balance of homeowners, business, and retail. And that's something that we haven't talked about yet. But we hear a lot about what's happening with the retail downtown. We are, we're building greater hotels for visitors and for commerce, people who are coming in in support of some of our businesses and industries that are really beginning to thrive. We have rental. We have a lot of residential rental going up. But what's going on in terms of retail? A lot of people, and Zach, I think this is part of what you're talking about, is what's available downtown for the residents other than the hotel. I think it's safe to say that downtown Tucson is terrific, but it's beginning to be known as a place that has great restaurants and great music. And, there's... And thank God for Johnny Gibson's, we have at least there's a grocery store down there now.
Until we have the residential density, retail is not that good a deal downtown right now. Yeah. But it's coming. I mean, there are thousands of residential units that are going to come online in the next couple of years. And that will allow retail to flourish. But it's not there yet.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've studied this. I would imagine that there's a typical progression you see. You get the bars and the restaurants in the old warehouses, and that revitalizes the area. Then you start to bring people in, and then I would imagine retail.
Right, and you hope you're going to bring people in quickly when that happens.
Yeah. And I think that's the benefit of having the rentals, is that you can do that quickly. So it's not an anti-rental campaign. It's the word you said, balance.
So retail will be in response to the new residents, as opposed to building new retail in order to attract more residents.
Right. I mean, the residents have to come first.
Yeah. Well, and maybe the residents having to spend their dollars at all of our wonderful downtown restaurants will help the restaurants too.
And that's good too.
That's right. Until we do have more shopping and more retail available. And
if you look at the streetcar route as a shopping district from Mercado through, you have a lot of retail connected to that. So it's not like there's a desert of retail. There's quite a bit of variety on that streetcar route. It's just not all concentrated in the.
Well, you read my mind, because I was just about to say that's a benefit of the streetcars.
Exactly.
Even if you reside
that's where the retail has happened, is along that route, which makes perfect sense, of course.
So, can either of you shed any light or give us any information about the expansion of the streetcar, since it's been brought up?
There's, I know the city has applied for some grants to study. Where it goes, I don't know, but I know that the city.
Those are federal, aren't they? Through the
I don't know who's providing the grants. I know they've applied for some grants to look at different routes. My personal opinion is that it means absolutely nothing. But my personal opinion is it's going to connect something with the airport, and either go through that new the tech park that U of A's created down there with the marketplace and all of that going in that area.
Yeah.
And Elcon.
Elcon could become a very central hub in that.
Yeah.
There's also talk potentially trying to do stuff with South Tucson to bring some economic benefit to that area. Where it goes, I don't know. I would imagine that private-public partnerships are going to be crucial. There's so much property value increase when you have that streetcar. You would think that someone would be eager to sort of step up. My vision is to create it like the Olympics and say, okay, where are we going to take the streetcar next? Let's all bid on this and let's get the businesses together. And what are you willing to put up? What are you willing to put up? And then find out which group is most eager to have that, and then have them drive that cost so the city's not bearing the cost of the expansion.
And in the interim, while we await this expansion of the streetcar, related to Sunshine Mile, RioNuevo intends to have a rubber wheel trolley that will go from probably Elcon to the TCC.
And what's the name of it?
Oh, well, if Fletcher McCusker has anything to say about it, it will be the Soul Train.
Well, you read my mind. We have great minds that are thinking alike here, because I was just going to ask you, what do you think the possibility is for the streetcar to be expanded down the Sunshine Mile? And, in the meantime...
I think that will likely happen when it happens, but I really don't know anything about any plans for that.
Yeah. Well, one thing that we haven't really addressed that I'm curious to know about is accessibility for housing in terms of, I'm assuming that all of the buildings that are being developed now, the projects that are underway, they all have handicap accessibility and I know
they have to.
Yeah. They're compliant with all of the federal laws. And let me ask you, I know you were talking earlier about the cathedral project. Isn't that designated as senior housing?
They have senior housing as a component of it, but they have a huge center for the Catholic business. And they have a fabulous.
Like a conference room,
huge conference room, holds like 500 people.
Like a ballroom where you would have a big event.
Exactly, you could have a big event in there, and it's a magnificent project. All the offices are there, the bishop is there, and it really is a beautiful complex.
And this is one of my things that I love to share is we didn't do, in my opinion, urban renewal really well in the 60s. And right now, there's a conscious effort to bring in that history and culture. So when you look at this multi-million-dollar project that was done next to the cathedral, they kept a core component, this metal amphitheater that was part of the original parish hall. And so they designed the outside of this building to fit that amphitheater and tie that back in. And I love the fact that we are building and recognizing that we are here because of those that came before us. And we're not trying to hide that or bury it. We're trying to amplify that and recognize and honor it. Even things like the Flynn, named after the Flynn family.
Right, Monica Flynn.
First El Charro, owner
she
of
was the first person to open an El Charro was Monica Flynn.
Monier's named after an architect that made bricks. I think he would be rolling over in his grave to know it's being made out of wood. But but it's this conscious effort to say that we are here because of those that came before us, and we're honoring them, but we are moving forward with them, not in spite of them or over them.
And rather Maynard's Market and Kitchen came from an historic figure in Tucson.
Well, and one of the things, too, and we're going to have to start wrapping this up, but one of the things that we're also preserving is the architecture. A lot of urban renewal projects were based on teardowns and building brand new, and and the cathedral is a terrific example of that. That's how that building has been restored, and it's magnificent.
It is.
And it makes you appreciate the architecture even more, because the restoration brought it to life. So I just want to thank Tom Heath, who is on the board of the Downtown Tucson Partnership, in addition to many other activities that he's involved in, and Jannie Cox, who is on the board of RioNuevo, and Zach Yenser, who is the executive director of the Tucson Young Professionals. We've been having a really great discussion here today about what's going on in downtown Tucson. And my name is Carol Nygett, your home for real estate. If you're interested in following this discussion a little more thoroughly, it will be available on the Tucson Business Radio X website. It will be available in a day or two as a podcast on all of your very favorite podcasting outlets. If you have questions or concerns, I'd love to hear from you, 520-448-6033. It's sunny in Tucson. It's 80 degrees. We want to say hello and our sympathies to those of you in the snow. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great rest of the day.
We hope you enjoyed Your Home for Real Estate with Carol Nygett on Tucson Business Radio X.